architecture evolved in various ages in different parts and regions of the country. Apart from these natural and obvious evolutions from the prehistoric and historic periods, evolutions of Indian architecture was generally affected by many great and important historic developments. External influences have also shaped the nature of Indian architecture, and so has the influence of different regions of the country. In North India, they developed a new different style of architecture. This was called as the Nagara style architecture. With the coming of the Muslim rulers, they developed a new architectural style in India, the Indo-Islamic architecture. The Indo-Islamic architecture was styled neither strictly Islamic nor strictly Hindu. Indian architecture comprises a blend of ancient and varied nature traditions with building types, forms, and technologies from West, Central Asia, and Europe. Religious condition. Hindu evolved due to the combination of faith of Aryans and Dravidians. Buddhism teaches against animal sacrifice and humanity. Jainism teaches avoidance of injury to life, honesty, and holiness. Elements of Indian architecture. Stupas, a shrine that represent at the sacred Mount Meru. 4 ceremonial gates, symbolic layers, towers of Hindu temples tell stories as they rise skyward.
Early historic period. An important phase of Indian architecture began with the Mauryan period 322 to 182 BC, especially under Ashoka architecture saw a great advancement. Mauryan art and architecture depicted the influence of Persians and Greeks. During the reign of Ashoka, many monolithic stone pillars were erected on which teachings of Dharma were inscribed. The lion capital of Sarnath pillar has been accepted as the emblems of the Indian Republic. Each pillar weighs about 50 tons and is about 50 feet high. The stupa of Sanchi and Sarnath are symbols of the achievements of Mauryan architecture. The gateways of Sanchi stupas with a beautiful sculpture depicting scenes from Jataka stories are specimens of the skills and aesthetic sense of artisticians. The Gupta period marks the beginning of the construction of freestanding Hindu temples. Example of this is the temple of Deoghar or the Jhansi district, which had the central shrine or Darbhagira where the image of the deity was placed.
Cave architecture. The development of cave architecture is another unique feature and marks an important phase in the history of Indian architecture. Famous among these were Ajanta and Ellora caves of Maharashtra and Udaigiri cave of Orissa. These caves holds Buddhist viharas, chaityas, as well as mandapas and pillared temples of Hindu gods and goddesses. Rock-cut temples. The earliest rock-cut temples were excavated in western Deccan in the early years of the Christian era. The Kailash temple of Ellora built by the Rashtrakutas and the Rasa temples of Mahabalipuram built by the Pallavas are other examples of rock-cut temples.
Medieval period architecture. Delhi Sultanate. The engineering features of these buildings were the domes, arches, and the minarets. The palaces, mosques, and tombs built by the rulers had these features of the indigenous architecture, and the new synthesis in architecture was achieved. The earliest buildings of this period is Quwwatul Islam Mosque at Delhi and the Qutub Minar. The latter tower, whose height is 70 meters. It is a tapering tower that has 5 stories. There are beautiful engravings of calligraphy both in the mosque and on the tower. Alauddin Khilji enlarged the Quwwatul Islam Mosque and built a gateway to the enclosure of the mosque. This gateway is called the Alahi Darwaja and is one of the most beautiful architectural designs even today.
The architecture of this period also shows how the indigenous styles were adapted and utilized by the builders. During this, we were still in the process of shutting down. The rulers were threatened by the Mongols who made sudden invasions from the north. This is why the buildings of this period are strong, sturdy, and practical. Bahmani. The Bahmani sultans borrowed from the styles of Persia, Syria, Turkey, and temples of southern India. The Jama Masjid at Gulbarga is quite well known. The courtyard of this mosque is covered with a large number of domes and is the only mosque in India with a covered courtyard.
Mughals. The advent of Mughals brought a new era in architecture. The synthesis of style which began earlier reached its zenith during this time. This started during Akbar's rule. The first building of this rule was Humayun's tomb at Delhi. Red stone was used in this building. It has main gateway and the tomb is placed in the middle of a garden. Many consider it a precursor of Taj Mahal. Next is the tomb of Salim Chishti, Palace of Judabai, Ibadat Khana, Birbal's house, and Sikri that reflects a synthesis of Persian and India element.
Colonial architecture in the modern period. The colonial influence can be seen in office buildings. Europeans who started coming for 16th century AD constructed many churches and other buildings. Portuguese built many churches at Goa. The most famous of these are Basilica Bom Jesus and the Church of St. Francis. The British also built administrative and residential buildings which reflect their imperial glory. Some Greek and Roman influence can be observed in the colonnades or pillared buildings. Parliament House and Connaught Place in Delhi are good examples. The architect's Latin designed Rashtapati Basan, formerly the Viceroy residence. It is built of sandstone and has designed features like canopies in Jaali Parmarjastan, the Victoria Memorial in Calcutta. The former capital of British India is a huge edifice in marble. It now houses a museum full of colonial artifacts. More contemporary style of buildings are now in evidence after independence in 1947.